This story is based on a real late-night delivery report. One delivery, one house. One mistake you don't realize until it's too late. Back in 2014, there was a pizza delivery driver named Chris Alvarez. Mid-20s, worked nights because the tips were better and the streets were quieter. Around 11:45 p.m., Chris got an order that stood out. Large pizza, extra cheese, cash payment. The address was a small house at the end of a dead-end street. No porch light, no cars out front. One window glowing faintly inside. Chris parked, grabbed the pizza, and walked up to the door. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again. After a few seconds, the door opened just enough for a man to step out. His name was Thomas Reed. Early 40s, unshaven, breathing hard like he'd just come from another room in a hurry. He didn't look at Chris right away. He kept glancing back into the house. Chris gave in the total. Thomas nodded quickly and reached into his pocket. His hands were shaking. Not nervous shaking, jittery, like his body hadn't caught up with whatever had just happened. Thomas pulled out a handful of bills. Chris noticed it immediately. One of the bills was stained red. Not soaked, not dripping, just smeared. Chris hesitated. He held the bill between his fingers and looked up. Thomas noticed. For a second, the man's face tightened. Then he smiled. Too fast. "Oh, paint," Thomas said. "I was working on something earlier." Chris nodded. He didn't question it. People paint late. People do weird things at night. He handed over the pizza. Thomas stared at the box for a second longer than necessary. Then he reached back into his pocket, pulled out more cash, and pressed it into Chris's hand. A big tip. Too big. "Sorry about that," Thomas said. "Long night." Chris said, "Yeah, no worries." Thomas stepped back and closed the door. Chris stood there for a moment. The house was quiet. No TV, no music, no movement. Just that dim light still on inside. Chris walked back to his car and drove off. He forgot about it. At least, he thought he did. 2 days later, he saw the news. Local woman found dead in her home. The address flashed on the screen. Chris recognized it immediately. Same dead-end street, same dark house. The man's name followed. Thomas Reed. Police said Thomas had called it in the next morning, claiming he found his wife unresponsive. But investigators said the timeline didn't match. The coroner estimated she'd been dead hours before midnight. Chris opened his delivery app. The timestamp was still there, 11:47 p.m. That was when it hit him, when Thomas opened the door, when his hands were shaking, when he explained the red stain. His wife was already dead inside. Chris contacted the police. They took his statement. They kept the bill. They told him something he never forgot. Thomas had been alone in that house for hours, sitting with it, waiting, trying to make the night look normal, ordering pizza, leaving a tip. Chris quit delivering a week later. To this day, he still thinks about that bill, how light it felt in his hand, how easily he accepted the explanation. Because sometimes, the scariest part isn't what you see. It's what you accept because you don't want to know more. Alright, if that story was creepy, this next one will leave you thinking twice about stopping at night. One stop, one encounter, one moment that shouldn't have followed her home. Back in 2019, there was a woman named Rachel Kim, early 30s, worked late, drove herself everywhere. That night, she stopped for gas just after midnight. Quiet station, 2 pumps working. The kind of place where the lights feel too bright because everything around them is dark. Rachel was halfway through filling her tank when someone spoke behind her. "Hey, miss." She turned. A man stood a few feet away, Thin, unshaven, clothes layered wrong for the weather. A panhandler. He kept his distance at first, asked for spare change. Rachel reached into her purse and handed him a few dollars. "Thanks," he said. Then he didn't leave. He stepped closer. "Got any more?" Rachel shook her head. "That's all I've got." The man stared at her, longer than necessary. Then he smiled, not friendly. "Come on," he said. "I know you got more than that." Rachel felt her stomach tighten. She glanced toward the station window. The attendant was inside, watching TV, not looking up. "I don't," she said. The man took another step, close enough now that she could smell him. She grabbed the nozzle, shoved it back into the pump, and walked quickly toward the station. When she turned around, the man was already backing away. Didn't say anything, just walked off into the dark. Rachel told the attendant what happened. He nodded like he'd heard it before. Said the guy comes around sometimes, usually leaves. Rachel paid and left. She didn't think about it again until 10 minutes later. She was driving down the highway when she saw someone standing on the shoulder. Same build, same clothes, same man. She slowed down. There was no way. The gas station was miles back. No shortcuts, no buses running that late. And yet, there he was. Rachel's heart started pounding. She kept driving, told herself it was someone else. But a few miles later, she saw him again. This time, closer. Standing near an off-ramp, facing the road, watching cars pass, watching her. Rachel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She took the next exit, pulled into a quiet side road, stopped the car. She didn't get out. She just needed to breathe. She looked around. The road was empty. No one there. She laughed nervously, told herself she was imagining things. Then something moved, directly in front of her car. The headlights hit him full on. The man stood inches from the hood. Same face, same clothes, eyes wide, unblinking, too close. Rachel screamed and slammed her foot on the brake. The man didn't flinch, didn't step back. He leaned forward, put his hands on the hood, and smiled. "You got more now?" he said. Rachel hit the gas. The car lurched forward. The man vanished. Not thrown, not knocked aside. Gone. Rachel didn't stop driving until she reached her apartment. She locked the door, checked the windows, didn't sleep. The next morning, she went back to the gas station, asked the attendant about the panhandler. The man frowned. "What panhandler?" Rachel described him. The clothes, the face, the smile. The attendant went quiet. Then he told her something that made her feel cold. She had also seen that man, matching that description. The same man her boss said had been hit and killed on that highway years earlier. According to Rachel, she doesn't stop for gas late anymore. And if someone asks her for spare change, she keeps her windows up. Because some people don't move on. They just keep asking. And sometimes, they follow. This next story is based on a real overnight construction report. Back in 2017, a night watchman named Luis Moreno worked security at a commercial construction site on the edge of downtown. He was in his early 40s and had been doing night work long enough to know the difference between normal sounds and the ones that deserved attention. The building was only half finished. The steel frame was up and the concrete floors were poured, but there were no walls yet, just open levels stacked above one another, exposed to the wind and the city noise below. Luis worked nights to keep trespassers out. After midnight, there were no crews on site and no equipment scheduled to run. Everything was supposed to be shut down. Around 2 a.m., while walking the lower levels with a flashlight and radio, he heard machinery. It wasn't voices or footsteps. It was mechanical, metal whining, followed by the slow, heavy clank of something shifting its weight. The sound echoed through the structure in a way that made it hard to tell exactly where it was coming from. Luis stopped walking and listened. There was no reason for any equipment to be operating. Power tools were locked out, and all lifts had been shut down for the night. He radioed the site supervisor, but no one answered. The sound came again, deeper this time, steady and deliberate, like a lift platform moving across concrete. It was coming from the third floor. Luis felt his stomach tighten. That floor had been restricted at night ever since the accident. 2 years earlier, a construction worker named Evan Pike had been killed there. Evan had been operating a lift when it malfunctioned, pinning him between the machine and an unfinished concrete pillar. The emergency stop failed, and by the time anyone reached him, the damage was already done. After that, no one was supposed to be on the third floor overnight. Luis climbed the stairs slowly, his flashlight cutting narrow paths through the darkness. As he reached the third floor landing, the sounds stopped. The sudden silence felt heavier than the noise. He stepped onto the floor and swept his light across the space. Exposed beams cast long shadows across bare concrete. The wind moved through the open structure, but there was no sign of equipment or workers. Luis stood there for a moment, listening. Then he heard the sound again, this time directly behind him, close enough that he felt a faint vibration through the floor beneath his boots. He turned quickly toward the stairwell. There was nothing there. Luis backed away and returned to the lower levels without finishing his walkthrough. He didn't report the incident. He told himself there had to be an explanation. The next night, it happened again. This time, the sound didn't stop when he reached the stairwell. It moved slowly across the floor above him. The unmistakable noise of metal rolling and hydraulics whining, followed by a sharp crack, like steel striking concrete. Luis looked up just in time to see a single work light flicker on by itself on the third floor. It swayed gently, as if something had just passed beneath it, and then went dark. Luis didn't leave his post, but he didn't go upstairs either. The following morning, he asked one of the older supervisors about the third floor. The man hesitated before answering. When Evan died, he said, the lift kept pushing, even after he was gone. Nobody could shut it off fast enough. Luis kept working there. He didn't have much choice. He had bills to pay and people relying on him. But after that, he became more careful. He kept his radio on at all times and avoided the third floor whenever he could. When he had to pass near it, he moved quickly and didn't stop to listen. The building never felt empty again. It felt unfinished. Like somewhere on the third floor, something was still moving heavy equipment late at night. Still working. Still trying to finish a job that never got completed. This story, our last story, was submitted to us by one of our listeners. You decide for its validity. I, for one, think this is very, very creepy. Here it goes. Back in 2020, there was a night nurse named Hannah Cole who worked at a regional medical center that stayed busy during the day and went unnervingly quiet after midnight. Hannah preferred the night shift. Fewer visitors, fewer interruptions. The hospital felt calmer then, like it was holding its breath. Around 3:10 a.m., she finished charting on the fourth floor and headed for the elevator to go down to radiology. The stairwells were being cleaned, so the elevator was the only option. She pressed the call button. The doors opened immediately. The elevator car was empty. She stepped inside and pressed the button for the basement level. The doors slid shut, and the car began to descend. For the first few seconds, everything felt normal. Then the elevator slowed. Too early. It came to a stop between floors. The indicator above the door flickered, then settled on 7. Hannah's stomach tightened. The 7th floor had been closed for renovations months earlier. No patients, no staff, no power beyond emergency lighting. Before she could reach for the emergency button, the doors opened. The hallway outside was dark, lit only by dim red exit signs. Plastic sheeting hung from the ceiling. Construction barriers blocked off most of the floor. No one should have been there. Hannah stayed inside the elevator. That's when someone stepped in. It was a man wearing a hospital gown, bare feet, IV band still on his wrist. He moved slowly, carefully, as if each step took effort. He didn't look at Hannah. He stood beside her, facing forward. The doors closed. The elevator didn't move. Hannah waited for him to press a button. He didn't. She glanced down at the panel. None of the buttons were lit. She cleared her throat and asked, "What floor?" The man didn't respond. The air inside the elevator felt colder, heavy in a way she couldn't explain. Hannah reached out and pressed the basement button again. Nothing happened. The man finally turned his head. His eyes were open, but unfocused, like he was looking through her instead of at her. In a quiet, strained voice, he said, "I'm not supposed to be awake." Hannah's heart started racing. The elevator suddenly lurched and began moving downward on its own. The doors stayed shut. The man turned back toward the front, his shoulders sagging, as if relieved. As the elevator passed the 5th floor, the lights flickered. When they steadied, the man was gone. The car stopped at the basement. The doors opened. Hannah stumbled out and didn't look back. Later that morning, she checked the hospital incident logs. There had been a patient death reported just after 2 a.m. Cardiac arrest. 7th floor. The patient had briefly regained consciousness before coding again. His chart listed something odd. When asked what he remembered, he'd said only one thing: "I was trying to find the elevator." Hannah still works nights, but she never rides the elevator alone anymore. And if it ever stops on a closed floor, she doesn't wait to see who might be stepping in next.
Alright, this is about done and we're gonna call it here. Time to digitize this and get some color on it. If these stories worked for you, check out the others I've already posted. Hit the thumbnail to the left and let it play. Until next time, zombies, I'll see you again.